Elaine, in an interview with Time magazine, President Trump dismissed concerns about his truthfulness, telling the reporter, "I can't be doing so badly because I'm president and you're not."
Well, Margaret, in that same interview with Time, he went on to defend himself by saying, quote, "The country's not buying it. It is fake media. The country believes me. Hey, I went to Kentucky 2 nights ago. We had 25,000 people." Has President Trump proven that so-called truthful hyperbole is often more effective than the truth in getting what you want done?
Well, it was certainly effective on the campaign trail. The issue is now that he's in office, the word of the commander-in-chief is something that is amplified around the world. So it certainly has caused some consternation among world leaders who then have to call their counterparts at the State Department and at the Defense Department and say, hey, is that really what U.S. policy is? And it's interesting to put the Defense Secretary's word ahead of that of the commander-in-chief. It's not the way things have normally been done. But I want to say to you, Elaine, in that poll that I mentioned in my piece, it's also important to show that credibility of the media, of the courts, other institutions is also on the decline. In fact, Trump's credibility is even with that of the media in terms of voters' trust. 34% of voters say they can trust Trump to do what is right almost all of the time. 34% of voters say they can trust the media to do what is right almost all of the time. So when it comes to facts, facts matter. And because there is this lack of trust in the media, perhaps what President Trump is saying when he calls out the fake media is resonating with people.
Well, Margaret, you also mentioned the Wall Street Journal editorial from this week. That piece compared the president to a drunk clinging, quote, to an empty gin bottle of fabrication. Given the credibility at issue here is no longer just his own, what has been the effect domestically?
Well, it was an incredibly harsh editorial, and it was surprising because the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal has been relatively friendly to President Trump. So to say that, this 3-week-long issue about this claim of wiretapping that remains unsubstantiated is actually hurting his plans to get things done, hurting his trust of the American public in terms of winning support on legislative matters for things like health care. The premise that the Wall Street Journal editorial board put forward is what I was talking about in the national security front. When there is really a need to have concern and the trust of the American people in the face of a national disaster, of a terror attack, of a war, that issue of credibility is something that can really be incredibly damaging overall to the democracy and to the institutions that are set to really protect and uphold the way the American people are supposed to be governed. And so that's really where the long-term concern is. But when it comes to governing, perhaps yesterday when the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes came and stood here in front of the White House, said there's nothing to back up the wiretapping claim, but he offered a political lifeline in some ways to President Trump, saying, well, there are some intelligence reports that may have mentioned President Trump's name or those of his associates, and he didn't like how those were circulated. But these were not surveillance of the president. These were reports about surveillance of foreign leaders who were in contact with the president. So there's a little bit of cleanup.
Yeah. What about on the international front, Margaret? You spoke with Iraqi Prime Minister al-Abadi this week and asked him about this issue. What is your sense of how President Trump's falsehoods are eroding trust abroad?
Well, I don't want to speak for the Prime Minister, but what I will say is that what he told me, I brought up the question of credibility in the context of what happened that day. The Iraqi Prime Minister, at the start of his very first face-to-face meeting with the President of the United States, made a joke to President Trump saying Iraq had nothing to do with wiretapping. And the very fact that that was brought up at all shows you that the President of the United States' words are parsed and they are heard, and obviously, it has injected some doubt into relationships with that of the UK. Remember, you had that controversy just last week about what Sean Spicer said from the podium and whether that had lent credibility to what was an unsubstantiated rumor linking British intelligence to wiretapping of President Trump. And so it has actually caused some diplomatic issues here. On the issue of credibility, I asked the Iraqi Prime Minister, because remember, we're on the battlefield right now. 5,000 American soldiers are on the battlefield of Iraq, helping them to fight ISIS. And trust, credibility on that national security issue is so key. He said, look, we're here and working with the American institutions, and American leadership, regardless of who's in the White House. So that, again, emphasized this really unusual reliance on the folks running the other institutions here, whether it's the Defense Department or the State Department, rather than putting their credibility and faith in the word of the commander-in-chief. And that, over the long term, could be really damaging. And it's a very uncomfortable position for many world leaders to be talking about. But they say behind closed doors, President Trump is trying to give reassurances.
Really fascinating insight. All right, Margaret Brennan at the White House for us. Margaret, thanks so much.